Hello, everyone. My name is Leonardo Flores, and I work in the HPC and Quantum Technologies Unit of the European Commission. First of all, I would like to thank Hyperion for this invitation that gives me the opportunity to present the current and future developments on HPC in the Union, and in particular of the Euro-HPC joint undertaking. My presentation will be structured in three blocks. The first will be on the new policy environment in the European Union and the main drivers that are affecting our HPC strategy. The second on the state of play of HPC in the Union today, and in particular the achievements of the Euro HPC. And finally, I will talk about the planned activities of the Euro HPC in the next decade. This presentation is very timely because the European Union has recently approved the continuation of Euro HPC for the next period. So I can give you an overview of what our plans are for the future. So let's see what are the new policy developments and the main drivers for HPC in Europe. So the most important policy development has been the definition of a European digital strategy. And digital technologies are critical for the future of the Union. And HPC is one of the key elements to implement this strategy. And in March 2021, the Commission presented a communication, the 2030 Digital Compass, the European Way for the Digital Decade, in which we presented the concrete objectives for achieving the digital strategy for 2030 along the four cardinal points of the digital compass that I show on the upper right side of the slide. So let me give a few examples of the objectives in each of these cardinal points. For skills, so at least 80% of all adults should have basic digital skills. For government, all key public services should be available online. For businesses, more than 90% of European SMEs should have at least a basic level of digital intensity. And for infrastructures, all European populated areas covered by 5G. Another objective in infrastructures is to produce in Europe at least 20% in value of the world production of cutting-edge semiconductors, and this includes processors. Roughly, this would be doubling from the current 10% in 2020. Finally, here in infrastructure also, Europe aims to have its first quantum accelerated computer at the end of the decade. The Union has also put in place several instruments to help repair the economic and social damage caused by the COVID pandemic. And one of them is the Recovery and Resilience Facility. This provides 672.5 billion euro to support reforms and investments in the member states of the Union. What is interesting here is that at least 20% of the facility funds in each country, they have to be dedicated to the digital transition, and this obviously will have a positive impact in national investments for HPC. Also, a very important aspect of this digital strategy is that we have to focus on European sovereignty by reducing our dependency on other regions of the world for critical technologies and infrastructures. And the last policy that we have to take into account is the European Green Deal. The objective of the Green Deal is to reduce the net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And this is for Europe to become the first climate neutral continent of the world by 2050. These also affect the digital policy. For example, we have to focus on energy efficient digital components. So for more concrete for HPC, I'm going to present some additional factors that will influence our strategy that we have designed for the next decade. First, although the situation is better in the last couple of years, thanks to your HPC, Europe is still underinvesting in supercomputing. For example, the Union has only around 18.6 of the systems in the top 500 supercomputers, while the US has more than 20%, around 24.5%, and China 36, 37% with much more accumulated computing power. So we have to do much better here because the impact of HPC is growing in critical industrial sectors that account for more than 50% of the union GDP. In technologies, we have the exponential growth of available data and computing power, and we still have to use much better our HPC capabilities to exploit the big data with high performance data analytics and AI techniques. We also have the exascale race that is driving the investments in supercomputing in the last few years, while at the same time, we see the convergence of HPC with cloud technologies, AI. For example, more HPC workflows are running in the cloud and more low power processors and accelerators are being used in data servers. We also see the convergence with the cloud, fog, the edge computing, IoT, 5G into a computing continuum. And this is a very interesting development that we have to take into account when thinking about our strategy in HPC. Another important factor is the increasing availability of usable quantum technologies, and this is to complement the traditional computing methods. And I will elaborate later on how quantum is being incorporated in practical terms into our HPC activities. Finally, an important fact is that no European player produces general purpose processors or accelerators, and this is reflected in the fact that no EU processor technology is present in the top 500 supercomputers. Um, Now we'll present what is the state of play of HPC in the Union and the activities of EuroHPC. So some of you know already about EuroHPC. EuroHPC is a legal entity established in 2018 to implement the European HPC strategy in the Union. And today we have 33 participating states. So this is all Union member states plus some associated countries and two private partners, the ETB for HPC for high performance computing and the Big Data Value Association. We managed to mobilize around 1.5 billion euros of public and private investments in only 2 years, in 2019 and 2020. The mission of EuroHPC was to deploy a world-class supercomputing and data infrastructure and support an HPC and big data ecosystem. And we structure the support to this mission in 4 pillars of activities that I show here: applications, technologies, widening the use of HPC, and infrastructures. So in the applications pillar, the most important activity was the support to HPC centers of excellence in several scientific communities. One of the main tasks of these centers was to promote the use of extreme performance computing in these communities, and for example, scaling up, redesigning, or developing new codes towards exascale performance. In addition, the centers address the skills gap in computational science with specialized training. And these centers were also set up to engage in co-design activities with initiatives developing European technology. The current COEs that we have, the centers, they cover the areas of engineering, environment, energy, materials, molecular and atomic modeling, big data and global systems, and biomolecular research, and also tools to optimize HPC applications performance. On the widening pillar, the most remarkable initiative was the establishment in most participating states of HPC centers of competence that will be acting locally to foster the use of HPC across Europe. So these centers, they will provide tailored services, HPC services and solutions to industry, including SMEs, and also to public administrations. The intention here is that they become the focal point coordinating all national HPC initiatives. So industries, local industries, and in particular SMEs, that they prefer to go local to find solutions. Uh, the centers of competence will facilitate access of these national players to European competence and resources. On the technologies, many of you already know, this was one of the main projects was the European Processor Initiative, the EPI. one of the main goals of this initiative was producing a competitive ARM-based CPU. And but this project has been already presented several times, so I'm not going to elaborate on this. I'm going to present on the novelty on this area, which is the selection recently of 3 projects for the integration of European technologies towards exascale in sizable pilots. We expect that these pilots will start after the summer break. So 2 of these pilots will be complementing the EPI processor efforts. One of the pilots integrating and testing the different generations of the EPI CPUs, the so-called REA and REA2 CPU generations, and they will integrate and test with a wide range of commercial accelerators. The second pilot is focused on developing 2 different strands of all European hardware RISC-V accelerators. So this second pilot will integrate and test the RISC-V accelerators with the EPI REA CPU. And the last pilot that we selected was on quantum technologies. And the goal here is to deploy European quantum simulation infrastructure of around 100 plus interacting quantum units. And this infrastructure will be accessible via the cloud on a non-commercial basis to public and private users. For the last pillar, I'm going to present specific slides. So these are the activities on the infrastructure pillar. This was a major objective of EuroHPC. It was to mobilize a critical mass of investments and increase the computing capacity that is available at European level. And what this means is that to establish and create a real common European infrastructure accessible from users all over the Union. And this investment is at the level of the Union. And this comes in addition or on top of the national investments of member states to buy their own national supercomputers. And so this is probably the most outstanding achievement of EuroHPC, which was the procurement of 8 world-class supercomputers in a very short period of time. And the acquisition cost of these systems will be around 510 million euros. So 8 hosting entities were selected to deploy the EuroHPC supercomputers. So we have here 3 pre-exascale supercomputers, the Mare Nostrum 5 to be installed in the Barcelona Supercomputing Center in Spain, the Leonardo system in Cineca in Bologna, Italy, and the Lumi supercomputer at CSC in Kajani in Finland. And 5 petascale supercomputers, the Ocalion in Portugal, Meluxina in Luxembourg, Carolina in Czech Republic, Vega in Slovenia, and Discover in Bulgaria. So this is the timeline for the installation and operation of the systems. So regarding the petascale systems, 4 of them, Vega, Meluxina, Carolina, and Discover, are already installed and operational. The other petascale system, the Ocalion, is expected to be installed in December this year. You have here some information on the systems. For the full details on the machines that are already operational, I invite you to consult their web pages or the top 500 list. But here for each supercomputer, you can see in green the aggregated total performance, which is adding the performance of the different partitions of each system. And in the last row for each machine, you have the ranking in the top 500 of the different partitions. Except for Discover that has only 1 CPU partition. The others have 2. Now, on the pre-exascale systems, Lumi and Leonardo, Lumi, the expected installation dates for the CPU module, the Lumi C, will be November this year, and this will be powered with AMD EPYC Milan processors. Then the accelerated module with AMD Instinct GPUs will be installed in March 2022. And it is expected that Lumi will have a theoretical peak performance of 550 petaflops and a lean pack performance of around 375 petaflops. For Leonardo, the booster module, which is the accelerated module, will be installed in January next year with the NVIDIA A100 GPUs and the data-centric and the general purpose modules, the DC and GP modules, they will be installed in May 2022 with Intel as like CPUs. This is expected that the aggregated performance of Leonardo will be almost around 250 Limpac petaflops. Finally, as you know, the procurement for the Mare Nostrum 5 system was cancelled, and we expect that it will be reopened in autumn. So hopefully we could have the selection award, an award early in 2022. Unfortunately, I cannot give you more details on what will be the requirements on the Mare Nostrum 5 tender yet, so please stay tuned for more information in the following weeks. So, as I mentioned before, the European Council adopted the legal text for the continuation of EuroHPC for the period 2021-2033, and with a budget for the first 7 years that I will detail in the following slides. And this achievement is very important development because the Euro HPC investments will be really defining the next decade of HPC in the Union. So the European Union, as you know, implements its budget in blocks of 7 years, what we call the multi-annual financial framework. And that's why Euro HPC has received a budget for 7 years, for 2021 to 2027. And the budget of our HPC is around 7 billion euros for this period. This is the expected total public and private investment, out of which more than 3 billion will be coming from the union budget and the rest from participating states and private members of the joint undertaking. So this budget will support a new ambitious mission, but I'm not going to read it for you in full. So what I can say is this mission takes all the elements that were already present in the previous mission, namely the development of the world-class supercomputing and data infrastructure, and the support to a full European HPC ecosystem. And what I will do here is just highlight the new aspects that we're incorporating. So in infrastructures, we have the quantum computing element coming new, the federation of the HPC and quantum resources, and their interconnection through very high-speed networks. On technologies, we have also reflected explicit support to the production of innovative HPC systems in Europe. And this production has to be based on a European supply chain of components, technologies, and knowledge. And EuroHPC has the objective to establish this European supply chain that limits the risk of disruptions, in particular from third countries. On applications, we have additionally reflect the need to optimize a wide range of applications for the systems produced in the EU. And widening, the new element here is the support to the Union's industrial strategy, which is to lead the transitions towards climate neutrality and digital leadership. And all these activities will be implemented in 6 pillars, in which we have the infrastructures, applications, technologies, and widening, as in the previous phase of the RHPC, plus the federation, which is a spin-off of the infrastructure, and the activities for the international cooperation. Now, more details on the infrastructure pillar. This is an overview of the planned acquisitions of EuroHPC in the next few years. But note that this is a very rough approximation because the concrete number of systems and the timing will depend on the decisions of member states, if they're ready and eager to host systems, and also their budget, because the EuroHPC supercomputers will be co-funded with national and European funding. The novelties here with respect to the previous phase of the EuroHPC is the inclusion of quantum computing elements that will be integrated in the supercomputing infrastructure. And we have also the possibility for EuroHPC to acquire, together with private partners, to acquire industrial grade supercomputers. or they can also acquire partitions of Euro HPC supercomputers that will be primarily dedicated for industrial use. And what we mean by industrial grade supercomputers are mid-range supercomputers that are specifically designed with requirements for industrial use, such as security, confidentiality, and data integrity. So on the HPC infrastructure part of the table, from 2022, we will start the acquisition of mid-range, pre-exascale, and exascale systems until 2024, and then probably will be concentrating the higher end of supercomputers from 2025. We're working already in an important objective, that is the acquisition of 2 exascale systems in the period 2022 to 2024, at least one based on European technology. So Germany and France have expressed their intention to host one of these systems, each country. On the lower part, we have the quantum infrastructure, which EuroHPC will be acquiring quantum elements, and the intention is to create a European hybrid classical and quantum infrastructure. On the first few years, we will start with the NISQ systems, the noisy intermediate scale quantum computers, and these systems at the beginning will be a basic integration with HPC systems, a basic complementarity of computing tasks. Later on, we will have quantum systems that are fully integrated with HPC computing workflows as accelerators. And at a later stage, we hope that the maturity of the technology will allow the deployment of prototype quantum computers with error correction and robust qubits. And this is just briefly to give an overview of the quantum activities that the Union will support. So not all of them will be carried by the EuroHPC, because we have research and innovation activities that are on the left-hand side of the slide. This will be done mostly in the Horizon Europe research program of the Union. On the right-hand side, we have the acquisition and operation of quantum infrastructures. And here's where the EuroHPC plays a role. As I mentioned before, in a first stage with basic and full integration of quantum elements, with HPC as accelerators, and in the long run with standalone systems. So here is the new pillar on federation. The goal is to federate some of the national and European HPC quantum and data resources, also with hyperconnectivity, namely with a very high-speed terabit network connecting the different data and HPC centers. This federated platform will provide cloud-based services for users. The objective here is to hide the implementation details and the very heterogeneous computing infrastructure that we have underneath, because it will be composed of HPC data and quantum elements. We want also to deploy this platform to avoid vendor lock and give users a lot of flexibility to develop their own virtual computing environment and execute their workflows by composing basic HPC services such as scalable computing, interactive computing, active data repositories, and all this will be provided by the federated platform independently of the supercomputers powering these services. As examples of users that will be very interested in this federation, we have the EOSC, this is the European Open Science Cloud communities, of course, industry, the public sector, and also major initiatives with a lot of computing demands, such as the digital twin of the Earth. This is a major initiative called Destination Earth or Destiny, or the digital twin of the human, or even more, the future European public data spaces that will be created in the near future, covering very important areas such as health, environment, energy, space, and agriculture. All of these, of course, are draft projections of what we intend to do. And finally, this is my final content slide. I will present the planned activities of the other main pillars of EuroHPC, which are technologies, applications, and widening. And the list of activities I will present here is non-exhaustive. It can be considered as a starting point because we will be refining this list every year. So on the technologies pillar, the main goal here for the research and innovation activities that we launch is to contribute to the strategic autonomy of the Union. So the activities will cover both hardware and software and their integration into systems and putting a particular emphasis on energy efficient solutions. Uh, the activities will cover low power processing components. So we have API, ARM-based solutions, and RISC-V processors technologies. We have the intention to have an open software stack initiative for the systems developed with EU technology. We will continue also the support to system architectures and novel algorithms, software codes, tools, environments. And we'll also have support for emerging computing paradigms and their interconnection and integration with HP systems. The objective here is not to develop these computing paradigms by themselves. The technologies will have to be linked with the development and deployment of supercomputers in the Union. On the applications pillar, the objective here is to achieve excellence and maintain European world leadership in key HPC applications in science, in industry, and the public sector. So we'll have here major initiatives for applications exploiting HPC with other technologies such as artificial intelligence, high performance data analytics, cloud technologies, etc. And this includes support to digital twin technologies, mainly in industry, but not only. For example, we have major granted challenges, as I mentioned before, like Destination Earth. We will continue the support to centers of excellence in HPC. We'll have also large initiatives on industrialization of HPC software and codes. And this is to ensure that professional industrial software codes and services can exploit the new HPC capabilities deployed in the Union. And finally, we'll have the deployment of large-scale industrial pilots, testbeds, and platforms. And the objective here is to demonstrate the secure HPC environments for key industrial applications. Finally, we have the widening use and skills pillar. And this pillar will be fostering industrial access to supercomputing and data resources adapted to industrial needs. We will be developing capabilities and skills in supercomputing, quantum computing, and data use. We'll also have the continuation to the support to national HPC competence centers, and we'll have specific activities to structuring the industrial user communities that are using HPC in Europe. So this is the end of my presentation. So thanks for your attention. I hope that it was useful for you. And if you have any questions, please contact me at this email address.